All right, so the recording is on, all right. Hello, warm welcome and very good evening to one and all. I'm Aisha Jumaila, Women in Computing Coordinator at IEEE MEA Student Branch Chapter. It's a wonderful day and I feel very excited and privileged to extend my warm welcome to all present here. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the topic Guide to Research Paper Writing. The webinar is conducted by IEEE Women in Engineering MEA Phonetic Group and resourced by our chief guest, Dr. Anupama Thakur. To talk about Dr. Thakur, she is the Vice President of Delhi Innovation Council, WICCI, and Secretary at IEEE Young Professionals Delhi Section. She's also the country representative at IEEE Photonics Society, USA, and Career Research Fellow at IIT Gandhinagar. She's a nanotechnologist working in the field of nanomaterials and material science for designing energy harvesting devices for solar to hydrogen production from water. Her doctoral research is focused on the development of novel nanostructured photocatalysts and photoelectrodes for efficient solar light-driven water splitting for hydrogen production. It's my great pleasure to welcome Anupama ma'am as the resource person and esteemed guest of today's session. Welcome, ma'am. Next, I'd like to welcome our counselor at IEEE MES SP, Mr. Jamshir Ahmad, Women in Engineering Advisor, Dr. Raji CG, Student Branch Chairperson, Mr. Muhammad Musharraf, V Chairperson, Ms. Shafnaz, and all the executive and non-executive IEEE members present here. It's time to get started. Just a bit of housekeeping before we head on. To keep the quality of the sound functional during the meeting, please mute yourself throughout the meeting unless instructed otherwise. If you have any queries during the presentation or after the presentation, please type them into the chat box. And at last, the participation certificates will be provided for all active participants and the session attendance will be taken manually. Now we are done with the housekeeping and we are starting the session with all your blessings. May I cordially invite our speaker of the day, Dr. Anupama Thakur, to our esteemed audience. Over to you, ma'am. You can take over the session now.
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate and I acknowledge the kind information received from IEEE ME Student Branch. So to start with today's session, I am sharing my presentation. So I request host to kindly confirm if the slides are visible clearly.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope it's visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. So thank you. So let's start the session, and I'm here as a resource person to share my views and insights on Guide to Research Paper Writing. So presently, as I'm representing IIT Gandhinagar, so I acknowledge and appreciate the IEEE fraternity with which, the networking as well as the opportunities we get with IEEE involvement and engagement. So that is great. So to acknowledge and to start with this, coming to the presentation at a glance. So today's session or the training room, which I'm taking to you, so will consist of the establishment of the right mindset to author a research paper. Then we'll be talking about research and publishing ethics, followed with identifying proper targeted journals for the research paper that you draft in. And then we'll also talk about structure of a typical scientific journal article, and we'll talk about citations and references, and finally we'll come up with a strategy, how to develop a strategy to publish a good research paper at a good and reputed journal. So to start with, first it's very important to have to ask yourself three main questions if you start any research paper. So the three main questions that you need to ask yourself consist of what you want to publish, or what is the idea that you want to convey to the audience. Then where you will, who is the audience to your paper? So where would your idea, result in? And the third thing is how you'll publish this article. So that is, these three main questions help you to build a good research article or any kind of perspective or review or any kind of draft that you would like to communicate to the audience. So to head further, now the message is that what you want to actually convey. So to answer what, that is the main question to yourself that you should ask. So it's very important that you should have a good take-home message in your article that the audience would take in. So based on that, the editors, they work on the quality of your manuscript. So you need to understand what is the importance or what is the novelty that you want to convey to the participants. So what is the message needs to be very clear in the creative writing that you utilize in writing a good research paper, or the way you communicate it to the audience. So heading further is, where will the paper end up? The audience you need to know. So that way you need to answer this question also in such a way that it is very important to communicate a paper in such a way that the audience, whosoever is reading it, should understand it to a very great level. So that way you need to choose a journal and write for the journal's audience in a very crisp or a concise manner. So that way, that really helps you to choose the appropriate journal and which type of study that you are reporting. Be it a medical study, be it any kind of theoretical or computational study, or it could be any kind of material characterization or any kind of electronic device that you are reporting. So that way, it is very important to understand your audience, and you need to again read the proper author guidelines for submitting to any journal. Now the next question is, how will I write it? So that is, the main question, like what kind of creative writing skills one need to adopt for writing a good research paper. So that way, firstly, you need to understand the journal where you are targeting your paper. You need to read the author guidelines mentioned there. And also you need to understand the style guide. So based on that, you need to draft your paper in such a way that it could be, referring to any kind of specific studies. It could be a systematic review, it could be a research article, it could be any kind of perspective or any kind of meta-analysis that you're doing for the data. So that way it is very important to know the style guide for a paper as well as to understand the author guidelines when you are writing a good research paper. So based on these three main questions, now we are here to build a right mindset to author a research paper. Okay, so when we talk about establishing a good mindset, so that way we are considering that one need to adopt a growth kind of mindset, which consists of a positive attitude. So that way, first you need to work upon the linguistic aspects of research writing. That way we consider either improving a grammatical English, or we're talking about writing skills, or you're talking about vocabulary. So that way, the first and important factor is to improve your linguistic aspects of research writing. Second essential part is to have good writing skills. That in order to have, in order to communicate what is your idea in a way that the reader should understand it very well. So that way, it is very important to have good writing skills, and to share some resources for a good research writing could be either you could join any kind of online courses in English writing at coursera.org, or you could read a very there's a very nice book at Google Books. That way, the elements of style. So this is one kind of resource which I'm sharing with the audience, and they can make use of them in order to establish good linguistic and writing skills. So that way, it is very important to have a right mindset before starting any kind of research paper. So while you build this kind of mindset, you can head further and understand the research and publishing ethics. So when we publish or communicate anything in the scientific fraternity, so we need to understand that we are promoting integrity in this scholarly research by doing any kind of publication, be it any research article or any review article. So we need to follow some ethics, and we should be aware of all the research ethics and publication guidelines. So to cater them, the three more main important ones I have highlighted here. So the first one is, to avoid plagiarism, which consists of self-plagiarism as well as, including the similarity index. So one need to understand that whatever we are conveying should be original, should be novel. It should not be copied from anywhere, and it should not consist of any kind of similarity index. So that way, this is the main guideline that one needs to understand, that whatever we are communicating, it should be original. So the second part is we need to understand that scientific misconduct and data falsification and data creation. So we need to understand these terms, which can lead us to be a good research author. Because whenever we say something, we publish anything, or we report any novel findings, so it is very important that those findings should be real. They should not be created, or any kind of data falsification should not be done with that. So that way, scientific misconduct should not be carried on, and one should be very ethical in communicating and performing good science. And the third part is, whenever we publish any article, we need to understand that whatever authors, they are involved in that kind of research. So we need to understand the role of those authors and contributors. So that way it becomes very important to follow research ethics and also acknowledge everyone who has contributed to that work. And there should be no conflict of interest in research. Like, some people have kind of monetary benefits for publishing good research or for publishing any article. So that way, conflict of research should be, clearly mentioned. There is no conflict of interest in the paper, and the authors who have communicated, they have actually participated in that research, and they have tried to do something novel which can help humanity. So that way, these are the main ethics which I would like to communicate with the participants. And with knowing this, we can head further to defining the focus and contribution of research. So now, whenever we publish, as I said earlier, we are contributing to scholarly research and publication, or I would say the literature, that the scientific literature we are contributing to. So based on that, it becomes very important to understand that by doing that, we are actually advancing knowledge by promoting science. Okay, so by doing so, again, we need to understand that some few questions which are very important that a research author should know. The first one is that what is the focus of your research project and contribution? So this should be very clear in your mind, that whatever we are doing, what focus it has to the audience, and how it can be related to societal or social impact. Okay, so that should be very clear. Apart from that, the second question that you should be very clear about is that what is the what already the audience know about it. Like, again, I said that it should be related to any societal or social impact, or any kind of study which has any relevance to the society. So that way, we need to highlight few parts in which we say that the audience are aware of this problem, and to cater that our solution is becoming a great role. Okay, so that way, that is important. Then we highlight the novelty of our work in a research paper. And finally, by doing all that we have done, for example, we have performed a good research. So next, we need to understand how the audience could relate it further and could add some few future perspectives to that. So that way, again, it should enhance the knowledge, as well as it should contribute to good scientific literature. So keeping that in mind, we need to determine the focus and contribution of the research that we are publishing. So with this now, again, coming to the point that how suitable is your article for publication. Okay, so to answer that, there are three main points which I would like to highlight here. So your article, or whatever you have drafted, a good research or a review article, it is acceptable for a publication only and only if it qualifies these three criteria. Okay, so the first criteria is the originality of your idea. So that way, a journal article publishes any research which is novel, which is based on one's novel ideas, research, and it adds something to the already existing literature. Okay, so that way, originality is very important. Second thing is the significance of your ideas, how good it relates to society, and which perspectives and which problems it is catering to. So that way, the significance is very important, and how does it fill a gap in the current discourse, or any kind of societal relevance, or any kind of impact that it is creating. So that way, significance becomes the second very important factor. And the third one is the quality of research writing. So whenever we publish or we draft a research paper, it is very important to have more creativity into that article these days. Because whatever we write, it should be written in academic style, obviously. And then one need to follow some kind of creative writing skills, which enhances the quality of the research that we're communicating, as well as that becomes more engaging for the reader to accept it the way it is. So that way, today, the research writing has become more of creative research writing, and that way the graphics in a research paper are also considered to be very engaging these days. So that way, the quality of research writing is increasing day by day, and that way we need to adapt to the latest cultures that is going on in this scientific field. So based on that, we need to work on these three main ideas in order to get that article published in any good journal. So with this, now if you talk about the capacity, representation, and access. So again, it becomes very important that whatever we are doing, we need to have a kind of detailed view of the state of the art or the literature existing to that domain. So obviously, because literature review is the foundation to our research, so that way it becomes very important to do a good literature review, and it becomes very important to review what research contributions have been made so far in that field, and from where we are taking up and what research gaps we are catering to. So that way, the capacity and representation and access to this literature review becomes very important. So to review the literature in a very good way, I'll be sharing two main search engines which can help you to do a good literature review. So the first one is the Google Scholar. So again, it is the simple way to broadly search for the scholarly literature. So it is a great help to all the researchers. So one can go back to Google Scholar and you can find the recent papers as well as the oldest literature as well, which exists there, because it's a broad search engine. So it helps you to get an idea about the kind of research that has already been taken up by various researchers globally. So that way, Google Scholar would be a great help to all the like researchers who have started their career, and this could help you to do a good literature review and to understand what has been done and what improvements can be done in that part. So that way, there are various aspects by which you can do a good literature search. So you can sort the data year wise, you can sort date by date wise, as well as you can search by title, by topic. So that way, these kind of few tips could help you to find kind of relevant literature for your work. And with this, again, it becomes very important. By Google Scholar, it helps you to understand that from which group is publishing this research, as well as which university or which kind of open source versions are available for that research article. So that way, this helps you to locate the full text of an article also. So that way, Google Scholar is the first and prime choice of researchers to have a good literature search. And the second one is Web of Science. So again, Web of Science is the second most accessible tool, which is for the researchers. So the people having access to Web of Science can make use of it to locate the core collection of the research, which could be based on the Science Citation Index, could be based on Social Sciences Citation Index, or could be based on other kind of index, could be Arts and Humanities, Conference Proceeding based Citation Index, could be booked citation index, and could be current chemical reaction index matrix also. So that way, based on these kind of indexes which are available with Web of Science, it is important to explore, discover good kind of literature. So that way, this is again the evolution of search which has happened with Web of Science. So it has become more prominent research ecosystem these days, and it helps you to do a good literature survey. So the people having access to Web of Science could extract much information and could help them to do a good literature survey. So based on these two search engines can really help you to perform a good literature search, and based on that you can start building up your skills for performing a good research. So now in between, I have few activities planned for the participants. So just to take a look over some kind of skills that you can access for writing a good paper. So initially, you need to test your knowledge and intellectual skills or abilities to do a good to write a good research paper. So based on that, it becomes very important to understand that what are your shortcomings and on what skills you can improve yourself. So that way, these are few points which I have just collated here. So one can just try to estimate what improvements can be done based on what skills that you have so far. So considering the first one, which is to demonstrate awareness of existing literature in your field of research. So how good you are at it. So that way you can rate yourself, either you are excellent, average, or need development. So based on this, you can get an idea on which skills you can improve yourself. Whether it's about critically analyzing literature, it's about creating new ideas, it could be identifying underlying assumptions of literature. So that way these skills can be assessed, and you can I've categorized these skills under knowledge and intellectual abilities. So one can understand your strengths and weaknesses. So the second activity is to understand your personal effectiveness. So again, you can rate yourself either excellent, average, or needs development. So you need to understand that either you are willing enough, enthusiastic, and motivated to seek answers. If yes, then obviously you can write a good research and perform a good research at your college or school or university level. And if you're creative and innovative in your approach to research, so if you are excellent at it, so you can get going with with writing a good research paper and doing a good research. And if you think you are at average level or you need development, so you can sharpen your skills by adopting some kind of creative, writing classes or put kind of creative learning skills. So you can plan your schedules in such a way that you can enhance your skills. The second thing that you need to understand is again plan long-term projects. So how good you are at planning projects from starting from scratch to the device level. So that way again it helps you to assess your personal effectiveness. Then based on this, these are kind of questions which underline your personal effectiveness to writing a good research paper. Now coming to third activity in which you assess your skill based on your research, governance, and organization. So how good you are at compiling, understanding the milestones in your like candidature. It could be doctoral level, it could be undergraduate, graduate level, and what timelines. How good you are at fulfilling these timelines for your work. For example, you have set 1 week for doing any task. So how good you are at it, so that way you can again evaluate yourself. Then next point is how good you are at understanding the copyright and IPR regulations, because these days when you copy an image, so if it has a copyright, so you cannot copy it, right? You need to take several permissions to it. So how good you are at understanding the IPR of any research or any kind of data which is available online. So that way you need to understand the skills to do a good research and how you can create a good impact. Apart from that, you need to understand and you need to share different types of data, like proper data keeping is again very important, like how good you are at saving your data, curating your data, and further utilizing it for research outcomes. So that way again you can evaluate yourself for research governance and organization, which becomes very important to have good assessment of your skills for data keeping. So knowing this, now the fourth activity is to assess your skills based on influence and impact. So whenever you are doing a good research or writing a good research paper, so that way it is very important to understand that how good you are at working in a team, like whether it's it includes understanding of your behaviors of your peers, coordinating a good research, being cooperative enough in doing a good research, doing the task that you have been assigned. So that way, constructive feedback is very important to peers. So how good you are at it, and how good you are at kind of clearly ranging the styles of appropriate to do a good research, be it a thesis writing, be it a white paper writing, proposal, grant application, or any kind of journal article. So that way again you can assess yourself for influence and impact that you create when you work in a group. And the fifth activity which you should assess before writing a good research paper is your engagement skills. So how good you are at assessing your strengths and shortcomings as a writer and a researcher. So again, it becomes very important to understand that what are your strengths being a good researcher. It could be any of your strengths, be that you have good, creative thinking could be one of your strengths. Good, idea generation or it could be your strength. So that way you need to understand what are your three major strengths. Then you should understand which skills you need to develop over time. So that way again you can highlight few of them. And how the next question is that how can you develop those skills? So before you assume to be a good research author, you need to understand and assess all these skills. Only then it becomes easier to write a good research article and to do a good research. So now, as I have few kind of perspectives in which you can develop good skills for writing a good research paper. So whenever we talk about communicating science, whether it's in a research paper mode or any oral presentation or any kind of qualitative research that you're doing. So to enhance your skills, you need to work upon your communication skills. You need to understand how effectively you can engage audience with your work that you are presenting in a research paper or any kind of oral presentation. So again, to that you need to understand and adopt few strategies. So that way you can enhance your skills by either attending more seminars or conferences or presenting your ideas and collecting feedbacks from the audience. And that way that really helps to estimate the kind of skills that you are improving day by day. And if you talk about qualitative research improvement skills, so that way again you can develop some kind of mock interviews and some kind of attend a few professional development courses that helps you to improve your skills, whether it's for creative writing, for creative designing, or could be kind of linguistic skills that you're working upon. So that way, these are kind of few resources based on which you can develop and improve your skills. So with this, now coming to the point that we believe that now you have, you're quite adaptable to a good research writing skills. So based on this, now it becomes important to identify appropriate target journal for your paper, the research paper or article that you have written. So to that, it's very important that you need to follow the fundamental three-word rule, that is think, check, and submit. Okay, so think, check, and submit is again a very important aspect, which helps you to find a good appropriate journal. So before submitting or sending any of your paper to any journal, you need to understand that what is your research domain. Okay, so now, for example, you are from a material science background, so you list down 10 journals which are which focus on material science. Okay, then you check which journals are which journals are from reputed publishing family. Then you need to submit. So that way, think, check, and submit becomes very important, and this plays a very important role because these days, the predatory journals are behind data and articles. So that way, it becomes very important to be smart enough and prevent your data from getting published in any predatory journal. So that way, one should stay away from predatory journals who publish your work for some monetary benefits. So that way, you should stay away from those journals. And further, you need to understand the open access model for journals, because few journals they are open access. So you need to understand the concept of open access and open access journal publishing. Then you should not be swayed by the impact factor of the journal. One should understand that the research that we are publishing should target a proper audience. So that way one should understand the kind of journal that we are selecting. And before submitting any paper, it is very important to develop a research communication strategy, like to write a good cover letter for the author, for the editor. Then you need to highlight a few highlights for your paper. Then you need to understand what kind of strategy for publishing a good paper should be followed. So that way, identifying appropriate target journals again becomes an important aspect. So with this information, now if I showcase some diversity in journals, so if we talk about material science background, so this is the tree map showcasing various very highly reputed journals for material science background. So that way, these kind of journals they are there and they publish quality research and kind of materials that are reported day by day in material science. So now, considering that we have audience of diverse fields, so so this is the tree map for showing the diversity in journals for based on electronics. So these are very adequate journals for people who are working in electronics. Then we have diversity in journals for computer science as well. So these are few journals which I have highlighted here, which publish computer science related research. Then we have some kind of mechanical based journals which I have highlighted here. So these are again journals which publish quality mechanical science or engineering based research. And if we consider that we have few social sciences based people as well in the participants, so this is the diversity which is shown for various journals which cater to social sciences. So now we have a tree map for the diverse journals in mathematics. So people who are working in mathematics domain can, contact these journals, think of publishing their research in these journals, which could help them to find targeted audience. So now coming further, and talking about structuring of a good research article. So it becomes very important, like, there are several important parameters which the, structure of a research article consists of. So the first and foremost is the title. So now you should understand that what idea you are communicating. So that way, creating your contribution by, developing a good title becomes very important. So that way, to understand the impact of this title and abstract of your paper is very important. So the title should be very, concise and informative, and it should contain the most important words related to the topic that you want to communicate to the reader, and it should be, very effective, as I said, and should not be overly sensitized, uh, and it should be very concise and informative, as I said earlier. So that way, it becomes very important to have a good title and abstract for your paper. So now, just giving few examples. So, the bad title could be the amazing effect of bed nets on malaria. So this is kind of bad title because it is very general. It is not showcasing any kind of research that you want to showcase to the audience. The good title could be an example. As an example, it could be a randomized controlled trial of efficacy of insecticide-treated bed net used for malaria control. So now in this, example, the person is stating that what technique they have utilized in their paper and what efficacy to which problem they are dealing. So the problem is malaria control, and the major highlighted sub-problem is insecticide-treated bed net, the solution that they are showcasing. So that way, this is the good title, example for a good title, and this is the bad title. So based on this, one should understand that these are few tips for the participants. So what people do is that, they can first refer to few related papers and understand what titles they have, given to their research that they have published. So that way, the search engines like Google Scholar or Web of Science helps you to find like what quality titles are there and how could you make your title more effective and concise. Apart from that, one should try to focus on maximum 3 to 4 different keywords and phrases in the abstract. So you should understand that the title should be should revolve around the major keywords of your paper. So that way, that helps the audience to relate the work that you are presenting. So, giving an example from a recent article which was like published last year in Nature Medicine. So, they showcased and highlighted a very concise title was Digital Technology and COVID-19. So that way, you can understand that the concise and the informative, how informative this title is to oneself. So this is one example of a recent article which is published in Nature Medicine. So now coming to creating a contribution by writing a good abstract. So generally abstract is the, a kind of trailer to your paper. Like we have a trailer for a movie, so abstract becomes the trailer to your research paper. So that way abstract again becomes very important, and any abstract is limited to 250 to 500 words, depending upon which journals you are targeting. So sometimes it is 200 words as well. So that way, now you can understand that you have a limit of 250 to 200 or to 500 words. So now the choice of words should be very important. And the complete message should be conveyed in these limited words only. So that way, it becomes very important. So now there are a few kind of, major three kind of abstracts that one can write to any research paper. So the first kind of abstract is a descriptive kind of abstract. So in descriptive kind of abstract, this kind of style of abstract is suitable for some kind of, disciplines, be it engineering or some few sciences fields, which actually has, a complete description of contents which is presented in the abstract, the detailed information. So that way, in descriptive kind of abstracts, generally the word limit is also very high. It could be 500 to like 350 to 500 words. So that way, in this kind of abstract, the maximum information is, given by the authors in the abstract itself. The second kind of abstract is informative. So the informative kind of abstract is again it is very limited to words. It could be 200 to 250 words. So that way, by following this informative style of abstract, you need to be very precise, very concise in information, and you need to highlight the major points only. And the third kind of abstract is mixed. So in mixed, you can either provide a kind of a very important informative information, wrapped in a descriptive matter. So that way, the mixed kind of abstracts have word limits up to 300 words. So that way, you can kind of present descriptive information also, and some major points as an informative kind of style you can adopt. So that way, these three kind of abstracts kind of styles for creating an abstract are available. So one can adopt based on the journal or the author guidelines one is following. So now this is an example for an abstract, which was again recently a paper published in 2018. So now you can understand. So this is a kind of example for an abstract which a paper research article carries. So one need to be very choosy in writing, the kind of abstract that you are publishing. So now coming to the point, like after title and abstract, now it becomes very important to structure a good scientific research article or journal article. So again, by structuring an article, it becomes very important because that's the most crucial element. And when readers should read your paper, they should understand that from which domain you're referring to, from where this research has started, what was the conclusive brief intro about what has been already done, then what is the flow now, and where and what the authors are contributing, and now after this what can be future perspectives to the research that you are promoting. So that way, now structuring a typical scientific article is based on Imrad's approach. So Imrad is an acronym for introduction, materials, research, and discussion. Is the short form for the this. So mainly is introduction, M for material and methods, RAD is for results and discussion. So that way, this is the proper journal format structuring of any typical scientific article. So one need to focus on all these elements because they play a key role, a key role for the audience as well as to the editorial board. So whenever we submit a paper to any editor or to any journal, so it passes on through editorial office, then to the reviewing panel, and then it gets constructive or destructive comments to your paper comes in, and then you mold your paper, you improve your paper in such a way that it gets published to any journal article. So that way, these elements becomes very important. And to start with, the first one, that is introduction. After a title and abstract, now we're coming to introduction. So the introduction becomes, again, it plays in a crucial role. So that way, the reader should, draw immediately, like what is the crucial issue that you are addressing in your research paper. So the introduction becomes again very important, and it becomes very important to become a creative writer here, because you need to showcase the complete advancements or research trend which has taken place earlier in very limited words. So that way, introduction, again, you need to make it crisp. You need to have the maximum information collated in 2 to 3 paragraphs only. So that way, now you need to address and present literature review also. So that way, by introduction, you are actually setting up the scene for the audience, and you are actually briefing about what state of the art has taken place. So that way, avoid keeping introduction very long, because that does not solve the purpose, because that becomes boring again. So whenever we write a good research paper, we need to understand that it should become engaging for a reader or to editor. So that way, keep introduction short, but rather make it crisp, and try to present in maximum information that you want to communicate. So some few tips for introduction. So again, you need to tell the reader about why your research was needed. So these few questions should be addressed in your introduction, by the end of your introduction, in the paper. So the second point is, why does it matter to any kind of audience? Could be doctors, patients, policymakers, or researchers, or scientists, or any kind of dedicated readership. So again, why does it matter how you relate it, how you relate the relevance of the paper? So that way, you need to understand, and you need to, at the end of the introduction, you need to mention that why your work was, required. Like, what did you do that was more innovative and new in your work? So that way, you need to provide a direction in your introduction in such a way that the other parts could be connected. So basically, all these sections of any paper, like, they are interconnected. So introduction will build up a story for the material and a method section. Okay, so that way introduction will lead you to the next section. It connects to the next section. So that is material and methods. Okay, so now a few points for good practice points for introduction. So again, you can make it, the opening sentences could be straight to the issue. For example, either you are addressing any kind of environmental issue, any kind of energy related issue, or any kind of robotics, or any kind of field dedicated issue. So that way your opening sentences should be very crispy. Then again, it should contain most important details of the issue, of the problem that you're addressing to, and it should contain brief summary of the, what kind of controversy or best evidences that has been reported so far in the literature. And again, a good writing skill is to adopt, active rather than passive tense, so that again it becomes good writing skill. So with this, participants can, try writing a good introduction by creating a contribution to a research paper. So now coming to the next part, that is material and methods. So if it is a paper which qualifies to a material scientist discipline or nanotechnologist or any kind of people working in chemical areas or chemistry areas, so for them, the material section becomes again important part. But the people who are from computer science, electronics, or any kind of other disciplines, so the method or the methodology part becomes important. So now again, it becomes very important to write, to explain what method one has adopted for doing a good research. So what people find is that sometimes the editorial board finds that you have provided very less information on your methods. So that becomes one major point based on which the editorial board kind of rejects your paper. So that becomes so your method section should not be thin on details. Rather, it should carry maximum information and every step that you have followed in your research. So that way, the details that should be presented in method section should be that qualified to the readers, such that they can repeat the same method that you have adopted in your paper. So that way, method section becomes very important, and it should be written in a very detailed manner, and it should carry every information that you have adopted for carrying out that research. So now again, just clarifying more onto this. So method section should actually carry all kind of quantitative studies, like what have you done. For example, what design of experimentation you have you had adopted. What was the sample data that you took, like whether it was kind of patients you checked, it could be kind of any kind of animal data that you took, and then what outcome measures were taken, like what kind of other areas, specific areas that you would like to mention that had become an important part of your study. What kind of data analysis you have carried out, like what softwares you have used for analyzing the data. And last and not the least is the ethics. So if your study carries any kind of animal study or human study, so proper consent and approvals are required from the governing agencies. So that way, ethical clearance is very important. For example, the vaccine research that is going on. So any kind of vaccine research or any kind of human or animal research that is going on, they all need this kind of ethical clearance from the committees. So that way, again, that need to be mentioned in the method section of a paper. So when we talk about outcome measures, so yes, one need to consider the validation tools that one has followed. For example, if one is talking about water quality monitoring with some kind of materials, so that way, what kind of validation tool was used? It could be ICP-MS, it could be ion, ion chromatography, or any kind of validation techniques, or I would say the authenticated techniques which are used for validation. So that way, one can mention in this section. So when we talk about data analysis, so what kind of statistical methods one has used, adopted for performing a good research. So all that needs to be mentioned in the method section. So any kind of simulation tools that you have used could be MATLAB, could be any kind of other tools. So one need to provide all the data in this part of your research paper, and this information should be rich in data. Whatever you have adopted, you should clearly mention it, and you should mention every analysis that you have done onto that data. So next part, along with the methods and introduction and the results that will be coming further. So again, the figures and tables are important part of any manuscript or any research paper. So one should, focus more on creative designing of your figures or the data that you are communicating. So every figure or table, they should carry some standalone message. So it could be in terms of any data that you're presenting. And the next tip is that don't overload your figures or tables with numbers or huge text, because again that makes the figures look uh, more tightly packed. So that way, don't overload the figures, rather make them more appealing, more engaging by using good color schemes, and by having more emphasized way of presenting data. So that could be adopted. And figures and tables should be entirely understandable on their own. So don't make very complex figures which are tough for a reader to understand, because again that makes the reader or the author or the audience much specific. So that way, make your figures very appealing as well as more understandable. So the information that the figure should carry should be more user friendly, I would say. And don't create very huge long captions. So the captions should again be crispy and concise, and the relevant information should be carried by any caption for a figure or table. So based on this, again, one can practice writing a good method or material section for your paper. So now coming to results part. So we now have actually divided results and discussion in two parts in my presentation. See, in some papers, they accept results and discussion to be as one section of your paper. But in some journals, they expect you to write two different sections. One is focused on results, and the other section is focused on discussion. So that way, we need to understand the difference between both these sections. So I'm presenting a few of the differences here. So results actually carry the facts which your study has come to, and what kind of results that you have achieved by performing your study. So if you have any simulations that you have performed, or any kind of device that you have created, developed, and what are the testing results. So that way these results actually, they should be ordered around the kind of outcomes that you have achieved from your experimentation. So that way, the results should focus on clearly mentioning the kind of data that is an outcome to your work, and the results. And then when we talk about discussion, so now whatever result you have got, so that result should be supported by some kind of literature or some kind of state of the art that exists in that field. Because whenever we get any result, we say that it is it aligns to some kind of fundamental rules. So in discussion part, generally we strengthen our results with any references that has been done already in past. So that way the discussion should not be much extrapolated, I would say. Rather, it should be again crispy, and it should effectively discuss about the work which supports the kind of results that you have got. So that we start the discussion section with a single sentence that states the main finding of your work. And in this section, you can discuss both strength and weakness of your work. So, sometimes we have some success that we showcase in a paper, and we highlight few weaknesses also of whatever we have, researched so far, or whatever we are presenting in the research paper. So that way we can highlight few weaknesses also, and we can discuss about future recommendations or future perspectives of your research work. So that way this section helps you to talk about whatever you have, achieved, and what more improvements can be made in your paper. So with this, one can again practice. Next section, to conclude your paper, the last part is the conclusion. So now we need to understand that generally what people do, they start, they iterate similar kind of things. For example, they have written something in result section. So see again, so they copy that part again and just paste it in conclusion section. But that is not fair enough, and one should again by doing so one increases their chance of rejection of the paper from the journal. So that way conclusion section should understand, one should understand that this is the recap of all the things that you have stated earlier in the paper, starting from introduction to the conclusion, to the results and discussion part. So that way you need to understand that this is the recap of your key results, highlighting their significance in relation to any scientific or societal impact that you are addressing to. And based on that, again, in this conclusion section, you can acknowledge a few limitations or strengths of your work very precisely, not in a detailed manner. And further, in conclusion, you can make some brief recommendations for future outlook of your work. So that way, conclusion becomes the closing point for your paper. So that way, it should be addressed and kept very, again, concise, as well as it should carry the most prominent information. So with this, now coming to extras, which one should understand. So the extra point is citations and referencing for your paper. So now whenever we write a research paper, so we generally refer to some kind of fundamental literature reports. So that way referencing becomes very important. So it is very important to cite the proper references accurately and at exact places where you are quoting the text or the information that you are referring to. So that way one should restrict yourself to cite only key references rather than citing every research, because whenever we write any research paper, so there is a limit for referencing also. So one should understand and read the author guidelines in a very proper manner, because everything is defined, very well defined in the author guidelines. So you can check the journal house style, like what kind of style they're adopting. Based on that, the next part is the acknowledgement. So there's one, section of a paper is to write acknowledgement. So one should acknowledge the funding agencies, the people who have helped in that paper. And again, the author contribution is another part, which is a kind of section in a paper. So one should understand that whosoever is contributing to the article very, effectively. So one should know that on what aspects one has contributed. So you can draft this section and just highlight, for example, one has contributed in research paper writing, one has contributed in idea creation or any kind of aspect. So that way you can highlight the people who have helped you and in what way. Then talking about competing interest and funding and ethical committee approval, so I've discussed them earlier. So whenever we are doing any kind of research onto any population, could be animal, could be human, so that way that requires some kind of ethical approval. So one should go through all these approvals, and they should seek for the approvals and get approvals and then perform the study. So that way that all your information has to be properly given in the research paper. So now keeping everything in a consistent order, now just highlighting a few points, very important points here. So again, whatever your ideas are there, they all should be well organized whenever you're writing a good research paper. So each paragraph should capture and should focus on the topic that you're highlighting to. Don't mix and match everything, because understand that you are actually, whatever you are writing, so that is connected to the next sentence. So that way, the storyline should be kept very similar, very consistent throughout. And whatever you are writing in a paragraph, so you should understand that the first paragraph is linked to the second paragraph. So that way they should be supporting enough, and you should use some kind of supporting sentences between, creating some, kind of information relation between the two paragraphs. So that should be there. A kind of relationship should be maintained between the paragraphs or between the sections that you are writing. For example, it is introduction. So how, if from introduction your gaps have been calculated, and how you are addressing those gaps, what materials you have used, what methods you have adopted, and what results you have got. So that way, this is kind of a story that you are writing, and it should be in a consistent order. So now setting aside time to write. Now, whenever you start writing your paper, so in my with my experience so far, I would suggest you to write your paper in this way. So, first you should start writing the methods and the figures. You should start plotting your figures, write your results, write your discussion section, and then you can write your introduction, abstract, and title. Because this way you get an idea like what methods you have adopted, what you should collate your data in these aspects, and this helps you to write a good research paper and helps you to form a good link between the sections. So with this, you can start writing, and further, whenever you are ready with your paper, so now you need to understand like how you can select the right journal for your paper. So I've highlighted few, kind of journal selector tools for the audience here. So if you want to publish your paper in elsewhere, so for elsewhere, there's a journal finder. So one can go back here and you can, write search for the kind of like add some keywords here, and you can find some suitable journals for your paper. Then you can go to the other portal is Jane. So here again you can journal author name estimator. So again you can write few keywords here and find suitable journals. So these kind of journal selector tools helps you to find suitable journals for your paper, and then you can go back to those journals, read their guidelines, and modify your paper based on that, and then finally submit to these journals by checking whether they are not predatory. So that becomes again an important factor. Go back to these journals, read about the journal, what is the scope, what is the aim of the journal, and then you submit your paper there. So that way, smart submission is very important. So one should be very smart enough. So now the bottom line, if you want your journal, your research to be published, your research article to be published, so your main highlights should be that whatever you are doing, whatever research you are publishing, so it should address two important research questions. For example, the vaccine research going on, or any kind of uh, studies that are going on to overcome COVID. So all that is addressing to the important research question. So that is COVID. So that way, you should assume that whatever you are doing, it should have a relevance to the societal issues. Then you should use right method to answer it. Obviously, the strategy should be very effective, should be right. It should not it should not include any wrong practices or any kind of data falsification or data creation. So that way, it is very important to do a good science. So one should be strict on that. Then when you write a good research paper, so it should be short, clear account to the study, and it should consist of effective writing skills that you adopt. And most important, you should keep in mind that whatever you are writing, it should be written in a very creative and engaging manner, and it should cater to the targeted audience. So that way, you should follow some good practices or improve your linguistic skills. So with this, I thank participants and the organizers for inviting me here to deliver this talk. And with this, I conclude, and we can have interaction and questions now.
Yes, ma'am. It's looks like we have a few questions in the chat box. I can read it to you.
Yeah, sure.
The first question is by Vishal Agarwal. How can we find a good journal?
Yeah, okay. So, as I have mentioned, that there are some journal selector tools which are available. So, one way is that you go there, type some relevant keywords which are closely related to your work. So, from there you can get some journals which are more, impactful and related to your work. And when you get a list from the journals from there, then you can go back to those journals, study about their citation index, study about their impact factor, study about when that journal was started. So that way you can identify good journals. Apart from that, you can go through some citation indexed listing also. So based on that, that is SCIE. So you can go to that indexing list. You can find what is the index that is mentioned to that paper, and how good it is in terms of acceptability to the audience. So that way there are various tools which can help you to find a good journal.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope it's clear. And the next question we have is from Rakshit Bajaj. How long should a conclusion be?
Again, conclusion should not be very long. It should be around. It should end up when it's a research paper. Should be equally, equal to the abstract. I would say not much big. It should be. It should conclude the whole story into 50 to 300 words, not more than that. But it should be again crispy and effective.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We'll cover one more question. We are out of time, as you know. The next question we have is from Shafna's P. Should we also rate publishing journals based on review processes?
Should be rate publishing journals based on review process. Yes, you can, but I would say that sometimes the journals which are very fast in publishing, mostly they are either predatory journals or they charge you some money for that. So you should not rate based on the review processes. Rather, you should rate journals based on their importance and impact. Because generally, the minimum review period by a good journal is 1 month. So
Yes, ma'am.
that way helps.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It looks like we have covered few of our questions. We are out of time, and further questions can be directed to Ms. Anupama ma'am's LinkedIn. Is that all right, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. People can
Ah,
connect me there, and if they have any questions, they can interact.
all right. So that brings us to the end of today's wonderful session. I'd like to extend my deep gratitude to Ms. Anupama Thakur on behalf of IEEE MEA student branch for accepting our invitation and joining us for today's session. The session was indeed incredibly informative and elaborated. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah,
Next, I'd like to thank our SP Counselor, Mr. Jamshir Ahmed, Women Engineering Advisor, Dr. Raji CG, SP Chairperson, Mr. Muhammad Musharraf, P Chairperson, Ms. Shafnas, and all the executive members who led the success of this event. Last but not least, I sincerely thank every participant for joining us today and being a part of our event. We look forward to more such events hosted by IEEE MEA student branch for you. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time to present such a wonderful session. Have a nice evening and take care.
yeah. Thank
Participants
you.
may
Thank you
leave.
for having me. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Take care,
Thank you so much.
everyone.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Participants may leave the meeting window. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.